In the twilight of the world, when the great eagle of Rome had finally recalled its legions, the island of Britain was left naked to its enemies. It was a land bleeding, a kingdom without a king, a place built on the ash of broken promises. The Saxons, wild and pagan, crashed upon its shores like a relentless tide. Petty kings and warlords carved up the land, their swords wet with the blood of their neighbors. Trust was a forgotten luxury. An oath was merely a word spoken before the blade. The world was shadow, iron, and rain. And in this age of chaos, one man held the center, if only barely. Uther Pendragon, High King of the Britons. Uther was a king of war, his knuckles white around the hilt of his sword. He ruled not by love, but by fear and by strength. But the strength of a king is, so often, undermined by the weakness of the man. Uther's weakness was not for power or for gold. It was for Igraine, the Duchess of Cornwall. She was the wife of his most loyal vassal, Gorlois, the Duke of Cornwall, a man who had fought at Uther's side, who had held the line, whose loyalty was as hard and true as the granite of his own castle at Tintagel. This was the first betrayal, the original sin of Camelot, a betrayal of loyalty, of brotherhood, of a vassal by his king. Uther saw her at a feast. He was consumed. It was not love. It was a fire, a hunger that gnawed at his bones and clouded his judgment. He became obsessed, sullen, and dangerous. He offered Gorlois gifts, honors, anything to bring Igraine to his court. Gorlois, a proud man, saw the lust in his king's eyes. He saw the betrayal before it was ever acted upon. And he did the only thing he could. He defied his king. He stole his wife away in the night, riding hard for Tintagel, barring his gates against his own sovereign. Uther, in his rage, declared Gorlois a traitor. He laid siege to the duke's castles. The land, already weak, was now plunged into a civil war, not for territory, but for a king's lust. But Tintagel was strong. The sea crashed against its cliffs. The walls were high. Igraine was locked inside, and Uther was locked out. In his desperation, the king turned to the only power darker than his own desire. He summoned Merlin. Merlin. He was not a man, not truly. He was the memory of the old magic. Some said he was the son of a demon and a nun, walking the earth backwards in time. He did not see what was. He saw what would be. He was not good. He was not evil. He was necessary. He came to Uther in the driving rain, his hood casting a shadow where a face should be. "You are a fool," Merlin's voice rasped, seeming to come from the air itself. "You tear the kingdom apart for a woman you cannot have. Get her for me, wizard," Uther snarled, his crown askew, "and you will have whatever you ask." Merlin looked at the king, his gaze passing through him, seeing the long, bloody thread of fate that stretched from this one, sordid desire. He saw the chaos Uther was causing, and he saw the order that could be born from it. "I can do this," Merlin said. "I can weave a glamour. I can put the face of Gorlois upon you. You will walk into Tintagel. You will lie with her. She will not know." Uther's eyes lit with a sick fire. "Do it. But there is a price," Merlin added, his voice dropping to absolute cold. "What is born of that night is not yours. The child conceived in this betrayal belongs to me. It is my tool to forge, my price for your sin." Uther, blinded by his lust, would have promised his own soul. "Done," he said. "Anything. Now, do it." This was the second betrayal, the bargain that would seal the kingdom's fate. Merlin, the great enchanter, betraying the very laws of nature, and Uther, the king, betraying his own unborn child. That night, Merlin wove his darkest magic. The air shimmered, Uther's form twisted and blurred. When he looked at his own hands, he saw the hands of Gorlois. When he spoke, he heard the voice of the Duke. He rode to Tintagel. The guards, seeing their master, opened the gates. And Igraine, loyal and loving, saw the man she believed to be her husband return from the war. She opened her arms to him, and in that dark chamber, high above the storm-tossed sea, as Uther Pendragon betrayed his loyal duke, the duke himself was dying. Gorloy, leading a desperate charge against the king's siege, was cut down, his blood soaking the cold earth miles away. Arthur was conceived in the exact moment of his mother's betrayal and his father's death. He was a child born of lust, dark magic, and a lie. His very blood was tainted with the original sin of betrayal. When the news of Gorloy's death arrived, Uther dropped the glamour and married Igraine. He made his crime a law. Igraine, horrified, trapped, and pregnant, had no choice. The night the boy was born, the storm raged again. Before the child even had a name, Merlin appeared in the chamber. He was no longer a whispering shadow. He was a figure of absolute authority. He did not look at the weeping queen. He did not look at the king. He looked at the infant. "He is mine," Merlin said. "The price is due." Uther, now a father, protested. He begged. But the bargain was struck. This was the third betrayal. A father, for the sake of his crown, turning his back as his son was taken away into the night. Merlin took the child. He gave him to a loyal, simple knight, Sir Ector, and his wife. "Raise him as your own," Merlin commanded. "Call him Wart. He is to know nothing of his blood, nothing of his name. He is to be nothing." Arthur Pendragon, the true-born king, vanished. For 16 years, Britain bled. Uther ruled with a broken heart and a heavy hand, his other children weak, his court full of suspicion. The land festered, waiting, and in the countryside, Wart grew. He was a good lad, honest, strong, but unremarkable. He served as a squire to his older brother, Sir Kay. He was overlooked, he was humble, he was clean of the court's poison. When Uther finally died, his last breath a rattling cough, the kingdom shattered. There was no heir. The warlords descended, circling the empty throne like wolves. Civil war, total and absolute, was imminent. It was then that Merlin acted again. On Christmas morning, in the yard of the great cathedral in London, a miracle appeared. A massive, unhewn block of marble, and driven deep into it, an anvil of steel. And driven deep into the anvil, a magnificent, naked sword. Written on the blade in golden light were the words, "Woso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil, is rightwise king born of all Britain." The lords were furious. They felt betrayed. By whom, they did not know. By God? By magic? Their lineage, their blood, their power meant nothing. They tried. One by one, the strongest, the proudest, the most arrogant kings put their hands to the hilt. It did not move. It was as if it were part of the stone. The test had failed, or so they thought. They called a great tournament to decide the kingship by steel, as they always had. Sir Ector came, with his son Sir Kay, and their squire, Wart. Kay, on his way to the joust, realized he had forgotten his sword. "Wart," he bellowed, "you useless boy, ride back and fetch my sword." Arthur, ever loyal, rode back. But the inn was locked. He was desperate. He had failed his brother. Then, in the empty cathedral yard, he saw it. The stone, the anvil, the sword. He did not see the golden letters. He did not see the prophecy. He saw a sword. A fine sword stuck in a rock. "Well," he thought, "it's a shame to leave it here. Kay needs a sword." He put his hand on the hilt. The stone did not resist. The anvil did not hold. It slid free, smooth as water, singing as it met the air. He brought it to Kay. Kay, recognizing the blade, was stunned. He claimed he had pulled it. But Ector, a simple man, but not a foolish one, saw the truth in Arthur's eyes. He made them return to the stone. He made Arthur put it back. It locked fast. "Now, son," Ector said to Kay. Kay pulled. He was strong. The sword was iron. "Now, Wart," Ector said, his voice trembling. Arthur, confused, placed his hand on the hilt and drew it free. "Sir Ector, Sir Kay." They knelt. They knelt in the mud before their son, their brother. "Father, why do you kneel?" Arthur cried. "I am not your father," Ector said, his heart breaking. The other lords and kings did not kneel. When they saw a boy, a nothing, a squire, holding the sword, they did not cheer. They roared in fury. This was the ultimate betrayal. "A trick!" they shouted. "Merlin's witchcraft. We will not be ruled by a base-born boy." The kingdom was not united. It was fractured worse than before. The boy king, holding a sword he did not understand, was surrounded by enemies. Merlin appeared at his side. "They will not follow you, king," the wizard whispered. "You must make them follow." The first act of King Arthur was not to build a round table. It was not to speak of chivalry. It was war. A brutal, bloody war of unification. Guided by Merlin's strategy, the boy who was a king proved he was also a dragon. At the Battle of Igraine, he shattered the rebellious kings. He routed King Lot, his future enemy. He showed them not mercy, but the cold, hard steel of the Pendragon line. He won his throne not by magic, but by blood. He stood on the battlefield, covered in grime, the sword from the stone in his hand. The remaining lords, beaten and broken, finally bent the knee. They did not love him. They feared him. Camelot was not born in light. It was forged in the shadow of Uther's lust, founded on Merlin's cold bargain, and won by the sword. The age of betrayal was over. The wars were won. The age of Arthur, the boy king, baptized in the blood of his own rebellious lords, stood not as a squire, but as the Pendragon, the dragon's head. He had proven his lineage, not with a magic sword, for that was only a test, but with the cold, hard reality of steel. He had forced a broken land to kneel, but in the final battle against King Pellinore, the man who would one day become his ally, Arthur's youthful recklessness got the better of him. He was unhorsed, his shield split, and the sword from the stone, the very symbol of his right to rule, shattered. He was left disarmed, mortal, and for the first time, vulnerable. The king who had united Britain was now just a man without a weapon. Merlin found him by the edge of a lake, staring at the broken hilt in his hand. "A king is not his sword, Arthur," Merlin's voice echoed, seeming to come from the mist itself. "The stone gave you a title. It did not give you a reign. That you must earn." "I am defenseless," Arthur said, the boy Wart returning to his voice. "My symbol is broken. The lords will see this as an omen. They will rise again." "They will," Merlin agreed, "if you give them time. You need a new sword, a true king's sword, not one of prophecy, but one of power. Come." Merlin led him from the battlefield, away from the sight of men. They walked for hours, through forests so ancient their branches were like the arms of sleeping giants. They came to the shore of a vast, unnaturally still lake. The water was not blue, but a deep, shimmering silver, and a heavy mist clung to its surface, silencing even their footsteps. "This is the Lake of Avalon," Merlin whispered. "It is a doorway. It is the place where the world you see touches the world you do not." As Arthur watched, a shape emerged from the center of the lake. It was not a ripple, it was an arm clad in the purest white samite, rising from the depths, the sleeve glittering with pearls, and in its hand it held a sword. It was the most beautiful weapon Arthur had ever seen. The hilt was gold, set with jewels, but the blade seemed to be forged from concentrated moonlight. It was called Excalibur, cut steel. "There," Merlin pointed, "is your sword, but it is not a gift, it is a bargain." A figure was gliding across the water toward them, the Lady of the Lake, Nimue. She was beautiful and terrible, and her eyes held no human warmth. She was the priestess of this other world. "The sword is yours, King of Britain," her voice sang, "if you will promise to return it to me when your time is done." "I swear it," Arthur said. "There is more," she said, her gaze fixed on him. "The sword is mighty. It can cut any steel, but it is only a tool for killing. The scabbard is the true magic." She gave him the scabbard. It was simple leather, but etched with runes that seemed to shift as he looked at them. "While you wear this scabbard," Nimue explained, "you shall lose no blood. No wound, however deep, shall kill you. You will be invincible in battle." Arthur took them. He felt the power thrum in his hand. He was a king again. But this was Merlin's great, secret betrayal. A betrayal for Arthur's sake. Merlin knew that the king must not just be strong, he must appear divine, unkillable. But a man who cannot bleed forgets the feel of steel. A king who cannot be wounded forgets the price of war. The scabbard made Arthur a god, but it also made him reckless. It was a lie, woven of magic, that would one day unravel. Armed with Excalibur, Arthur returned. But he was changed. The wars had taught him that steel alone was not enough. His own conception, born of Uther's lust and betrayal, had shown him that a king's desire could be a kingdom's poison. He looked at his warrior lords. Gawain, son of the rebellious King Lot, now loyal, but his heart still hot with pride. His own brother, Kay, steadfast, but cruel in his honesty. Pellinore, his former enemy, now his sworn vassal. They were strong, but they were divided. They were men who knew only loyalty to the man who paid them, or the man who beat them. "This is how my father's court was," Arthur told Merlin. "A hall of vipers, men who knelt to the crown, but held daggers behind their backs. I will not rule that way. I will not be my father." "Then what will you build?" Merlin asked. "Something new," Arthur said. "Something equal." He commanded his knights, his lords, his kings, to gather on the feast of Pentecost. And in the great hall of the castle, he would name Camelot. He revealed his vision. Merlin, at his command, had built it. A table. It was massive, carved from a single, ancient oak. And it was round. There was no head. There was no foot. The lords were confused. Where did the king sit? "I sit among you," Arthur declared, taking his own seat. "As one of you." This was his great act, his attempt to heal the original sin of his bloodline. His father, Uther, had betrayed his vassal for his own lust. Arthur would become his vassals. He would bind himself to them, and them to him, not by fear, but by an oath. He made them stand. He made them place their hands upon the round wood, and he made them swear. This was the Pentecostal oath, the foundation of all chivalry. They swore to never do outrage nor murder, to always flee treason, to by no means be cruel, but to give mercy unto him that asketh mercy, to always give aid to ladies, damsels, and gentlewomen, and never to take up a wrongful quarrel, nor for love, nor for worldly goods. It was a revolution, a promise to use strength for weakness, to bind power with justice. The lords, knights, and kings, men who had lived by the sword, wept. They wept for the purity of the idea. For one brief, shining moment, the betrayals of the past were washed clean. The Round Table was born, and the golden age of Camelot began. Merlin, seeing this, knew his work was nearly done. He used his magic to build Camelot itself. It was not a castle of mere stone. It rose from the mists, a city that was both a fortress and a dream. Its towers were impossible, truncated. Camelot was a miracle, a dream of order made manifest in a world of chaos. The Round Table was a symbol, not just of equality, but of Arthur's desperate attempt to build a brotherhood so strong it could never be broken by the betrayals that had defined his father's generation. He was building a family, bound by an oath. But Arthur, the king, had forgotten one crucial, fatal truth. You cannot escape your blood. The sins of the father are always visited upon the son, and the sin of Uther Pendragon had not died with him. It had sisters. Far from the light of Camelot, in the storm-racked castles of Orkney and the enchanted forests, Arthur's half-sisters lived and watched. They were the daughters of Igraine, the children of the Duke of Cornwall, the man Uther had betrayed and murdered. They were Morgause, Queen of Orkney, and Morgan le Fay, the sorceress. They remembered the night their mother was deceived. They remembered their father's death. They saw Arthur, the child of that monstrous betrayal, sitting on a throne that should have been theirs. Their hatred was a poison, slow brewed for a generation. Morgan, the subtler of the two, had studied under Merlin himself. She learned the old magic, the deep arts of the earth. But where Merlin used his power to build, Morgan used hers to unravel. She saw the shining ideal of Camelot, and she despised it. She saw it as a beautiful lie, built on the bones of her father. She would wait. Her betrayal would be slow, a spider's work. But Morgause was a creature of fire, ambition, and a cold, reptilian cunning. She was married to King Lot, the very man Arthur had defeated in his first war. She was the mother of Gawain, Arthur's most loyal nephew. She was inside the court, and she decided to strike, not at Arthur's armies, but at his soul. She came to Camelot during a great feast. She was beautiful, a dark mirror of her mother, Igraine, and Arthur, young, victorious, and perhaps arrogant in his newfound glory, did not know who she was. He did not know she was his own half-sister. She came to his chambers. She seduced him. And Arthur, the king who had sworn to flee treason, committed the darkest treason of all. He lay with his own sister. This was not passion. This was not lust. This was fate. It was the ultimate karmic betrayal. Arthur's own conception was born of a lie, a glamour, a stolen night. And now, his own sin, an unknowing but profound act of incest, would create the man who would destroy him. From that single, unholy union, a child was conceived. His name would be Mordred. Merlin, his vision suddenly clear, saw the tapestry of fate. He came to Arthur, his face not angry, but terrified. "My king," he whispered, "what have you done?" He told Arthur the truth of Morgause. He told him what was coming, a prophecy. A child is born of you, a son, and this son is fated to destroy you. He will be the death of you, and the death of Camelot. Arthur, the just king, the man who had sworn the oath, was now Uther. He was his father, a king terrified of a prophecy, and like his father, he chose betrayal to solve betrayal. He listened to Merlin's dark counsel. The child would be born on May Day. Arthur, in a secret, horrific decree, ordered that every noble-born child born in Britain on May Day be gathered and set adrift on the sea in a leaking boat. It was the act of a tyrant, a Herod. It was the ultimate betrayal of his own oath. By no means be cruel, but to give mercy. He murdered an entire generation of infants to kill one. He betrayed his kingdom to save his crown. But fate cannot be cheated. The boat carrying the infant Mordred did not sink. It washed ashore. The child was found. He was raised in secret, nourished by the same cold hatred that had conceived him. He would be back. Arthur, his hands now stained by a sin far deeper than Uther's, returned to his throne. He never spoke of it, but the act poisoned him. The Golden Age was now built on a lie and on the graves of children. And then he arrived. As if to mock the new darkness in Arthur's heart, the light of the world appeared. Lancelot du Lac. He was not like other men. He was raised by the Lady of the Lake, in the same mystical realm that had forged Excalibur. He was magic, and he was steel. He rode into Camelot, and the court stopped. He was the most beautiful man anyone had ever seen. He was the greatest swordsman, his movements like a deadly dance. He was the most courteous, the most gentle, the most humble. He was perfect. Arthur looked at Lancelot, and he saw redemption. He saw the knight he had always dreamed of. the living embodiment of his oath. They became, almost instantly, inseparable. Arthur loved him. He loved him with a purity and a depth that he had never known. This was not Uther's lust. This was the brotherhood Arthur had been searching for. He made Lancelot his champion, his first knight, his greatest friend. Lancelot, in turn, worshipped Arthur. He saw in him the king that the world deserved. This was the great betrayal, waiting to happen, because Arthur had a queen, Guinevere. Merlin's prophecy, the one Arthur had ignored, now returned. She will bring your doom. She is fated to love another. The first time Lancelot and Guinevere met, the world stopped. It was not a choice, it was a recognition. His soul knew hers, her soul knew his. They saw in each other the same perfection, the same impossible standard, and they were doomed. For years, they fought it. Lancelot, out of his profound love for Arthur, threw himself into a life of ascetic purity. He wore a hair shirt beneath his armor. He prayed. He fought. He became the greatest knight in the world because he was trying to burn his love for Guinevere out of his soul. Guinevere, for her part, was a good queen. She was loyal. She loved Arthur for his goodness, for his vision, but she did not burn for him. The court was full of light, but it was a strained light. The three of them, Arthur, Lancelot, Guinevere, a perfect, tragic triangle. The king who loved his friend, the friend who loved the king, and the queen who loved them both, but loved the friend more. And in the shadows, Mordred was growing, and Morgan Le Fay was watching. The tension became unbearable. The perfection of Camelot was now a lie. The knights felt it. The court felt it. The very stones of the castle seemed to cry out under the strain of the unspoken betrayal. The brotherhood of the Round Table, once so pure, was now poisoned by a single, perfect secret. The knights grew restless. The tournaments became more violent. The chivalry felt hollow. They needed purification. It came as a vision. On the Feast of Pentecost, as the knights sat at the great table, a sound of thunder rolled. A sunbeam, brighter than any sun, pierced the hall, and riding on the beam, veiled in white, was the sangreal, the Holy Grail, the cup that Christ had used at the Last Supper. It passed through the hall. It offered no glimpse of itself, but the air it touched was filled with peace. Every wound was healed. Every heart was filled. And then, it was gone. Gawain was the first to stand, his eyes blazing. "We have been blessed," he cried, "but we were not worthy to see it. I swear I will not rest for a year and a day until I have looked upon the Grail unveiled." One by one, the knights stood. They took the vow. Arthur was horrified. "You are leaving me," he cried. "You are leaving the kingdom. This quest, this will be the death of the Round Table." But he could not stop them. The spell of the Grail was stronger than the oath to the king. This was the spiritual betrayal. The knights, in seeking a divine purity, were betraying their earthly duty. They abandoned their king, their city, their charge, to chase a ghost. LNB, Lancelot, was the first to ride out. He knew why he could not see the Grail. His sin, his love for Guinevere, was a shroud over his eyes. He rode, not to find the cup, but to find forgiveness. The court emptied. The great Round Table stood, vacant. Camelot, once the center of the world, was now a hollow shell, populated by old men, women, and a king whose heart was breaking. The quest was a disaster. Most of the knights died. They were killed in petty squabbles, by temptation, by their own pride. Gawain, too hot-headed, too worldly, was told he was not worthy. Lancelot, the greatest knight, came within sight of the Grail, but his sin was too heavy. He was struck dumb, paralyzed, a failure. The only one who could succeed was the one who was pure. And his story was another betrayal in itself. Lancelot, years before, had been tricked by magic. A princess, Igraine, had disguised herself as Guinevere, and Lancelot, believing he was with his queen, slept with her. From that betrayal, a son was born, Galahad. Galahad was Lancelot, but without the sin. He was pure. He came to Camelot. He sat in the siege, perilous, the empty seat at the table that would consume any unworthy knight, and he survived. It was Galahad, with Sir Percival and Sir Bors, who finally achieved the quest. They found the Grail, they looked upon the divine, and the cost? Galahad, too pure for the world, ascended to heaven. Percival died in the Holy Land. Only Sir Bors returned. He returned to Camelot, to the empty table, to the aging king. He told the story. The Grail was found. But the price of finding it was everything. The magic was gone. The best knights were dead or ascended. Camelot was now just a castle. The Round Table was just a piece of wood. And Lancelot returned, broken, having failed. He knew he was a sinner. And Guinevere saw his pain. And their love, no longer held back by a quest for purity, finally broke free. The quest for the Holy Grail was over, but it was not a victory, it was a harvest. It had taken the best of Camelot, Galahad, Percival, and left the rest of broken. The knights who returned were not heroes, they were survivors. They had faced their own souls in the wilderness and found themselves lacking. Sir Bors returned, his eyes hollow, to an empty table. Sir Gawain returned, his famous chivalry now tainted by a bitter pride, having been told he was unworthy. And Sir Lancelot returned, the greatest knight of all. The failure, he had failed the quest because of his one defining sin, his love for Guinevere. He had proven, in the eyes of God, that his loyalty was divided, and in that failure, he found a terrible freedom. If he was already damned, why, then, should he continue to fight? He and Guinevere, two souls who had struggled against their fate for a decade, now exhausted, broken by the world's impossible standards, fell into each other's arms. The secret, unspoken betrayal now became a reckless, physical one. Their love, once a tragic, hidden pain, now became a desperate, hungry ghost, haunting the halls of Camelot. And they thought, no one saw. But in Camelot, everyone saw. The court, once bright with idealism, was now thick with whispers, with sidelong glances, with the sour smell of hypocrisy. The great oath of the Round Table was a joke. The king preached justice, while his first knight cuckolded him. The betrayal was no longer a secret, it was an insult, and in the shadows, the son of betrayal watched. Mordred. He was a knight of the Round Table now, brought to court by his half-brother, Gawain, and acknowledged by Arthur with a cold, formal dread. Arthur kept his enemy close. He gave him honor, hoping to appease the fate he had tried to drown. But Mordred's heart was as twisted as his conception. He looked at Arthur not as a king, but as the man who had ordered him murdered in his cradle. He looked at Lancelot, the perfect, beloved, false knight, and he hated him. He saw the affair not as a sin of passion, but as a weapon. He was joined by his brother, Igraine. While Gawain was blinded by his love for Lancelot, Igraine was driven by his jealousy. "Look," Igraine hissed to Mordred one night. "The king is a fool. He sees nothing. Lancelot and the queen, they shame us all. They shame the oath. They shame you. They shame the king," Mordred replied, his voice a silken trap. "And a king who allows himself to be shamed is not a king." The plot was set, a betrayal born of jealousy, wrapped in the language of justice. They gathered 12 knights, all loyal to Gawain's family, all whispering of Lancelot's arrogance. They waited for Arthur to be gone. A hunt. They waited for Lancelot to go to her, as they knew he would. The castle was dark, Guinevere's chamber was lit by a single candle. Lancelot was there, unarmed, save for his sword. He was not a knight. He was just a man, trapped. "I feel a coldness," Guinevere whispered. "There is a shadow over this castle, Lancelot. We are not safe. We are never safe," he replied, touching her face. "But while I am here, traitor." The voice was Mordred's. The door crashed open. Igraine, Mordred, and the 12 knights spilled into the room, their swords drawn, their faces twisted in righteous fury. "Lancelot, you are taken, in treason with the queen." Lancelot and Guinevere froze. It was done. The secret was out. The world had ended. Lancelot was unarmed. He had no armor, no shield. One of the knights, Sir Colgrevance, lunged. Lancelot moved. He ripped the sword from Colgrevance's hand, and in the same motion, cut him down. The room exploded into chaos. Lancelot, with only a sword in a nightshirt, fought 14 armored knights. He was not a man, he was a storm. He killed them. One by one, he killed them all. He killed Igraine, splitting his helm. He killed all 12 knights, his brothers of the Round Table. Only Mordred, seeing the massacre, fled. He fled, wounded, to carry the tale. Lancelot stood, panting, covered in the blood of his friends. He looked at Guinevere. "I must go," he said, his voice dead. Arthur, will be told. "Flee, flee to my castle. I will protect you." "No," Guinevere said, her face a mask of stone. "I will not run. I am the queen. I will face the law." Lancelot, his heart torn from his chest, kissed her one last time and fled into the night. An outlaw. Mordred, bleeding, found Arthur returning from the hunt. He told him everything. The trap, the fight, the slaughter. Gawain, hearing that his brother Igraine was dead, fell to his knees. Arthur said nothing. The king, who had faced armies, who had pulled a sword from stone, stood paralyzed. This was the betrayal Merlin had promised. His wife, his best friend, the two people he loved most in all the world, had destroyed it. He walked into the great hall where the Round Table stood. The seats of the dead knights were empty. His law, the Pentecostal oath, was clear. Treason against the king was death. Adultery with the queen was treason. And the punishment was fire. He had built a kingdom of laws, precisely so his own desires could never again poison it, as Uther's had. And now, he was trapped by his own creation. He had to betray his heart, to uphold his law. "She is the queen," he whispered, his voice breaking. "She will be tried, and if found guilty, she will burn." Gawain stood. His face was pale. "My king, not this, not Lancelot. There is a mistake. Lancelot, he would not." "He did," Arthur said, his voice hollow. "He killed your brother, Gawain. He killed my knights. He lay with my wife. The law is the law." The day of the execution was dark. The sky was leaden. Guinevere, stripped of her crown, was led to the pyre. Arthur sat on his throne, watching, his face stone. He had betrayed his love for his kingdom, but there was one betrayal left. Gawain, torn between his king and his friend, went to his two remaining brothers, Gareth and Gaheris. They were good men. They loved Lancelot. "We must attend the execution," Gawain said, his voice thick. "We will not," said Gareth. "We will not watch this shame. Lancelot is our friend. You will go," Gawain roared, "by order of the king. But go without your armor, as a sign of protest, to show we do not agree with this day's work." They obeyed. They stood by the pyre, unarmed, in simple green tunics. The torch was lit. It was lowered toward the wood. "Lancelot!" He came. not as a friend, but as an invader. He and his knights, his own family, charged the execution square. They were desperate. They were furious. They were trying to save a queen from a king. It was a massacre. They cut down the guards. They scattered the priests. And in the blood madness, Lancelot did not see. He did not see Sir Gareth, his friend, the man who adored him. He did not see Sir Gaheris. He saw only the king's men. His sword, the sword of the perfect knight, cut them down, unarmed, unarmored. He fought his way to Guinevere. He pulled her onto his horse, and he was gone. He had saved his love, but in his wake he left a new and final betrayal. Gawain, who had been struggling with his loyalty, ran onto the field. He saw the body of Igraine, and now he saw the bodies of Gareth and Gaheris, lying in their own blood, murdered by the man they loved, the man Gawain loved. The betrayal was complete. Something inside Gawain snapped. The love he held for Lancelot, a love as deep as Arthur's, turned. It curdled. It became a pure, white-hot hatred that consumed every oath, every memory. He walked into the great hall where Arthur sat, his head in his hands. Gawain laid the body of Gareth at the king's feet. "King," he whispered, his voice a venomous hiss, "your law has done this." He drew his sword. But he, Lancelot, has done this. He killed them, unarmed. He is a murderer. My king, you betrayed your wife for your law. Now, you will uphold your law. For me, we will have war. The Brotherhood of the Round Table was dead, murdered. Camelot was no longer a dream. It was a blood feud. Camelot was dead. It still stood, its towers piercing the clouds, but its soul had been murdered. The Round Table, once a symbol of unity, was now a fractured, bloody memorial, and Sir Gawain, once the light of chivalry, was now its executioner. His love for Lancelot had been the only thing stronger than his pride, and now that love, betrayed, had curdled into an obsessive, all-consuming hatred. It was a madness. He had lost 3 brothers, Igraine to a plot, Gareth and Gaheris to a blind rescue, all dead by Lancelot's hand. "He is a murderer, my king," Gawain repeated, his voice raw, kneeling not in fealty, but in accusation. "And you are the king of justice. Your own law burned your queen. Now, your same law must break your first knight." Arthur was trapped. The king, who had built his reign on law, was now a slave to it. He did not want this war. He knew Lancelot. He knew his friend had struck in a blind panic, but Gawain was his blood, his nephew, the embodiment of his broken court. To deny Gawain's call for justice was the final betrayal. "Gather the banners," Arthur whispered, his voice dead. "We sail for France." The great army of Camelot, the Brotherhood of the Round Table, crossed the sea, not to fight Saxons, not to save a damsel, but to hunt one man. They laid siege to Lancelot's castle, Joyous Gard, and the tragedy was, Lancelot would not fight back. He loved Arthur. He would not, could not, raise his sword against his king. Days turned into weeks. Arthur's army starved. Morale collapsed. Gawain, enraged by this peace, this cowardice, rode to the gates himself. "Lancelot," he roared, his voice cracking. "Traitor, murderer, come out and face me. Or are you as cowardly in battle as you are in the bedchamber?" Lancelot emerged, not in anger, but in profound sorrow. "Sir Gawain," he pleaded, "I will not fight you. The men I slew, it was by accident, a madness. I will offer penance. I will walk barefoot from here to Rome. But I will not lift my hand against you. You will fight me," Gawain hissed, "or I will cut you down where you stand." This was the great betrayal of the oath. Gawain forcing a wrongful quarrel out of pure, personal hatred. The legend says Gawain possessed a secret magic, His strength waxed with the sun, peaking at noon. They fought. For 3 hours, Lancelot, the greatest swordsman in the world, did nothing but defend. He parried, he dodged, he blocked, as Gawaine's monstrous strength rained blows upon him. At noon, Gawaine was a giant, a god of rage, but Lancelot endured. As the sun began to wane, Gawaine's strength faded. Lancelot, seeing his opening, struck one blow. He wounded Gawaine grievously. Gawaine collapsed. Lancelot, weeping, stood over him. He did not kill him. He turned his back and returned to his castle. The siege was a failure. The army was broken. Arthur's spirit was broken. Gawaine's hatred, however, only festered. And it was, in this moment of division, this perfect vacuum of power, that the final betrayal, the one prophesied at Arthur's conception, struck. Arthur, in his final, catastrophic mistake, had left a regent in charge of Britain. He left the man he should have trusted least, his son, his shadow, Mordred, the man he had tried to murder in the cradle. Mordred saw the king gone. He saw the army divided. He saw the kingdom empty. His hatred, so long hidden beneath a mask of loyalty, now glowed. This was his moment. The moment his mother, Morgause, had promised. He did not raise an army. He wrote a letter. He forged letters, sealed with the king's signet, declaring that Arthur was dead, slain in France by Lancelot. The kingdom, he declared, was his. This was the ultimate betrayal, not just of the father by the son, but of the truth itself. But his betrayal went deeper. It became a dark, horrific mirror of the original sin. Mordred declared he would take the throne, and he would also take the queen. He rode to the Tower of London, where Guinevere had taken refuge, and demanded she marry him, his father's wife. The cycle was complete. Uther's lust for Igraine had begun the saga. Mordred's lust for Guinevere would end it. Guinevere, horrified, barred the gates. The nation, confused, terrified, divided, shattered into a dozen factions. The dream of Camelot was over. News reached Arthur in France. A messenger, half dead, carried the letters. Arthur fainted, the weight of it all. His son, his wife, his kingdom, gone. Gawaine, lying in his tent, dying from the wound Lancelot had given him, heard the news. And in that moment, his own madness cleared. He saw what his hatred had wrought. He had forced Arthur to chase a ghost, while the real demon took his home. "My king," Gawaine whispered, as Arthur knelt by his bed. I have done this. My pride has doomed us all." With his last breath, Gawaine dictated a letter, not to Arthur, but to Lancelot. He begged him, "My friend, forgive me. Come to Britain. Help your king. My king. Help him. Against my brother." And then he died. Arthur, his heart now an empty cavern, took his army. He sailed for home. There was no time to wait for Lancelot. He landed at Dover. Mordred was waiting. His army, full of Saxons and traitors, met him on the beach. It was a slaughter. Arthur's men, weary and heartsick, fought with desperation. They won the beach, but at a terrible cost. Arthur walked the shore, looking for his son. Instead, he found the bodies of his last loyal knights. The war raged across Britain. Finally, on the plain of Camelot, the two armies met for the last time. The day before the battle, Arthur had a dream. He saw Gawaine, his face pale, surrounded by the ghosts of the knights of the Round Table. "Do not fight tomorrow, my king," the ghost whispered. "If you fight, you will die. Wait for Lancelot." Arthur awoke, his body cold with dread. He heeded the warning. He called for a truce. Mordred, perhaps also fearing the end, agreed. The two kings, father and son, traitor and betrayed, walked onto the field, each with 14 knights. They were to sign a treaty. They stood, face to face. The treaty was in hand. The hatred was thick in the air. The armies watched, their hands white on their swords, and then a betrayal. Not of man, but of fate. An adder, a small, venomous snake. It slithered from the grass and bit one of Mordred's knights on the ankle. The knight, in a moment of pure, unthinking reflex, drew his sword to kill it. That was all it took. The flash of naked steel. Both armies, paranoid, poisoned by years of betrayal, believed the truce was a trap. Treason! A voice screamed. The war horns sounded. The Battle of Camelot began. By accident. It was not a battle. It was an apocalypse. It was the end of the world. They fought all day. They fought with a hatred so profound that they forgot chivalry, forgot mercy, forgot the oath. Brother killed brother, friend killed friend. They fought until the sun set, and the field was silent, ankle deep in the blood of the noblest knighthood the world had ever known. By dusk, it was over. Two men were left standing. Arthur, leaning on his spear, his armor shattered, and across the field, Mordred, standing on a pile of the dead. Sir Bedivere, Arthur's last loyal knight, his arm broken, crawled to him. My king, you have won. He is the last. Let him go. The prophecy is done. Let him go. You are alive. Arthur looked at Bedivere. Then he looked at Mordred. He saw not a man. He saw the physical manifestation of his sin, the child of incest, the traitor, the thing that had unmade his world. He knew, in that moment, what Merlin's prophecy truly meant. Now, Arthur whispered, his voice terrible, give me my spear, Ron, for I see him, and my end is near. My king, no, the dream, Gawain. Gawain is dead, Arthur said, and so is Camelot. He raised his spear. Traitor, he roared, his voice the last thunder of the Pendragon line. Now is your death day come, he charged. He ran across the field of the dead, his feet slipping in the blood of his children. He struck Mordred. He drove the spear through his armor, through his body, lifting him from the ground. Mordred screamed, and with the last, defiant act of pure distilled hatred, he did not fall. He pulled himself up the spear shaft, closer, closer, until he was face to face with his father, and with his last breath, he raised his own sword and struck Arthur. He plunged his blade deep into his father's skull, through the helm. Arthur released the spear. Mordred fell, dead, and Arthur, the king, collapsed beside him. The father and the son, the betrayal, at last, was finished. Arthur was dying. The mortal wound, the scabbard, the magical scabbard. It was gone. Stolen weeks before by Morgan Le Fay, his sister, in her final act of spite. He was mortal. He was bleeding. Bedivere, he gasped. His last night, the first night he had ever made. Take Excalibur, take it to the water, and throw it in. The bargain with the Lady of the Lake, it must be honored. Bedivere, weeping, took the sword, the last relic of Camelot. He ran to the lake, he raised it, but he couldn't. The hilt, the jewels, it was beauty, it was history, it was all that was left. To throw it away was a betrayal. He hid the sword in the reeds and returned. What did you see, Bedivere? Arthur whispered. My king, I saw only the wind on the waves. Arthur's eyes, already fogged with death, cleared. You have betrayed me, he choked. My last command, for the richness of the sword, go again. Bedivere ran. He held the sword. He couldn't. He lied again. My king, I saw nothing but the water. Arthur, with his last strength, tried to rise. Traitor, you have broken the oath. You have betrayed me. Twice. Go again, and if you fail me, I will slay you with my own dying hands. Bedivere, his heart broken, ran. He looked at the sword, he looked at his dying king. He roared in grief, and he threw it. He threw it, end over end, into the silver water, and an arm, clad in white samite, rose from the deep. It caught the sword by the hilt. It held it aloft, once, and then vanished beneath the water. The bargain was paid. The magic was gone. He carried Arthur back to the shore. A black barge, silent, had drifted from the mist. On it, 3 queens. One was the Lady of the Lake, one was the Queen of the Wastelands, and the third was Morgan Le Fay, his sister, the sorceress. Her face no longer filled with hate, but with a profound ancient sorrow. "My brother," she whispered. They laid him on the barge. "I am dying, sister," Arthur said. "No, my king," she replied, touching his wounded head. "We go to the Isle of Avalon. There, you may be healed." The barge slipped back into the mist. Bedivere was left alone on the shore of a broken kingdom. Arthur was gone. Some say he died. They buried him at Glastonbury. But others say he sleeps. He sleeps in the heart of the magic isle, his wound healed, waiting for the day his kingdom needs him. The inscription on his hidden grave does not say, "Here lies the king." It says, "Hic acid Arthurus, Rex quondam, Rexque futurus." Here lies Arthur, the once and future king. The man had failed. The perfect ideal was betrayed by his father, by his friend, by his wife, by his nephew, by his son, and by his own human heart. But the dream of Camelot, the dream of a round table, of might for right, that dream sleeps, and it will come again